Diversities Court and our court's diversity committee, I really would like to say thank you for joining us. We could not be more thrilled today to welcome Judge Blackmon and Justice Stewart to this event today, and we're just very excited. And so a couple of just sort of ground rules that I'd like to go over. If you could please make sure that you're muted today, that would be wonderful. And then as we go through the presentation and Judge Blackmon gives her remarks, if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to put those in the chat. And Judge Turner will make sure that those are acknowledged as we go through the program. So again, thank you for joining us today. I did want to point out that Judge Brendan Sheehan could not be with us today, but he just wanted to again give his thanks to Judge Blackmon and his congratulations to her on her retirement. And thanks to Justice Stewart for being here today. And we're really excited to have all of you. So without further ado, Judge Turner, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon to everyone.
Good afternoon.
It is truly my privilege and honor to present the first African-American woman to be elected to the Ohio Supreme Court, Justice Melody J. Stewart. She will introduce our keynote speaker, the Honorable Patricia A. Blackmon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Judge Turner. Good afternoon, everyone. So great to see so many familiar faces or familiar names for those of you who aren't showing your faces. It's my honor to introduce someone who probably needs no introduction. As we all know, Judge Blackmon, or Pat, or Trisha Ann, as she's been called, is completing her final hours of her 30-year career on the 8th District Court of Appeals. I don't know if she's the longest serving appellate court judge in the state of Ohio, but she's got to be close to it if she's not the first. And also, as we know, she is the first African-American woman to serve on the Ohio Court of Appeals. She and Judge Sarah Harper were elected in 1990, but Judge Blackmon's service, I believe, started one day before Judge Harper's, so she gets to claim the title as first. If you don't know that Judge Blackmon was born, raised, and educated in Mississippi, you either moved to Cleveland yesterday or you just haven't been paying attention over the years. After graduating with honors from Tougaloo College in Mississippi, the young woman, Trisha Ann Blackmon, found her way to Cleveland to attend law school in the early 1970s. Although her attending Cleveland Marshall wasn't so groundbreaking in and of itself, because the law school had Black alumni, women who had attended the law school, but you can only imagine what this must have meant to her family in the segregated South in Mississippi. The rest, as we all say, and of course know, is history. I won't go into Judge Blackmon's notable accomplishments over the years. You can look at that on the bio, the Court of Appeals website bio, which you might want to access before it gets removed and replaced with the bio of Judge Emanuela Groves, who of course is succeeding Judge Blackmon in that seat. And let me digress for a minute to say three things. One, depending on how long Judge Groves stays in the seat on the Court of Appeals, and depending on who succeeds her, we may have to dub that seat for this term, the Black seat. And I say that because who's sitting in it now? Pat Blackmon, right? She's in the seat for 30 years. Judge Groves succeed her. And the term starts in February, right? Black History Month. So we might have to officially call it that. Second, as noted, Pat Blackmon has been sitting in the seat again for 30 years. And although she's kind of a petite woman, I imagine there's still a little bit of a groove in the butt part of that seat. So Judge Groves, I hope you get a new chair, or at least a new cushion in the seat of that chair. And finally, an observation of the current makeup now of the Court of Appeals. With Judge Groves moving across the street, half of the 8th District Court of Appeals is now comprised of former Cleveland Municipal Court judges. Judges Sean Gallagher, Mary Eileen Kilbane, Larry Jones, Kathleen Keogh, Anita Laster-Mays, and now Judge Groves. So I suggest, 8th District people, that a new sign be made that says 8th District Court of Appeals, Cleveland Municipal Court North. How about that? Think about it. Think about it. Now back to Pat. It should come as no surprise that when I thought about running for the Court of Appeals, Pat Blackmon was the first person I talked to. Many of you have probably done the same. She discussed the pros and cons of running, the politics of it, gave sage advice, recommended other people that I should talk to, and ended our conversation by saying, but don't run against me, as if that needed to be said. When I joined the Court of Appeals, she, as well as my other colleagues, were of course very helpful in my getting acclimated and getting up to speed. Also helpful to me was then Court of Appeals Judge Carla Moore from the 9th District, who had been assigned to me as a mentor through the Judicial Conference. When I joined the Court of Appeals, Judges Blackmon, Moore, and I were the only African-American appellate court judges in the state. I'd like to, if I can take a privilege to show this, if my technology will allow me to do this. I'll see if I can show this screen. Can you all see that?
Ah.
Okay, now get ready. So this was taken in my investiture ceremony back when I got to the bench. And there you see the entire makeup of the African Americans in the Court of Appeals back then. Since that time, if I can get out of that screen, stop sharing, okay. Go back to, but with the subsequent elections of Larry Jones, Anita Laster-Mays, and Emanuela Groves here on the 8th, Tim Horton, Laurel Beatty Blunt, and Terry Jamison on the 10th, Myron Duhart in the 6th, and the appointment of Ray Head into the 8th after my election to the Supreme Court, 10 African-American judges have served on the appellate courts since Judges Blackmon and Harper were elected in 1990. I hope that my former colleague and my forever friend will always take pride in the doors she opened for so many of us, but particularly for those of us who've served on the Court of Appeals, those who continue to serve on the Court of Appeals, and those who will serve in the future. So it's with great pleasure I introduce our keynote speaker for today, Judge Patricia Ann Blackmon.
Thank you so much, Judge. I want to say greetings to all of you who are on the call for the celebration, the acknowledgement, and the praise of February, Black History Month. Before I get started, I want to personally thank Judge Cassandra Collier-Williams, Justice Melody Stewart, Judge Deborah Turner, and Judge Brandon Sheehan, and anyone else who laid hands on this day. And I've been thinking about this. I see that Justice Stewart thought a lot about her introduction, which was good because then I don't have to repeat that information about where we are, where we were, and where we're going. So I'm going to take a different approach. And by the way, we did not decide that we were going to wear blue today. So I'm going to take a different approach. How do we know whether a person is talented? I happen to think that all people are talented. They have some talent, whether you recognize it or not. And I have concluded over my lifetime that you listen to their stories. I first met Judge Cassandra Collier-Williams probably in 1986. She started working in the mediation department when I was the chief prosecutor for the city of Cleveland. I take great pride in saying I hired her. Her talent for gathering knowledge was evident. It radiated to me. So when she asked me to speak, I picked this day because I knew this was going to be my last day on the bench. She said to me, "You sure you want to speak on the 10th?" And I said, "Absolutely. It's cold outside. So I can't play golf. So I may as well speak." Just kidding, just kidding. So when she told me that the justice from the Supreme Court was going to introduce me and that Judge Deborah Turner was going to ask questions or monitor the questions, I exploded with joy. And so I am so happy I made this determination to come. You know, the poet George Santayana said, he said it first. He said, when he wrote these words, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." Then a famous historian, African-American, John Hope Franklin, put a different twist on it. And he said, "Those who don't know their history are condemned to repeat its worst failures." Then the father of Negro History Week and Black History Month said this: "Those who have no record of what their forebearers have accomplished lose the inspiration which comes from the teaching of biography and history." We all can learn from history. All people who have made this country the new world and made it great. We don't have to judge people by their identity and ethnicity. We can judge them by their talents. I know Martin Luther King said he wanted his children to be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, and I add, by their talent. When Carter G. Woodson first envisioned African American History Month, I don't think he envisioned it because he named it Negro History Week, and ultimately it became Negro History Month. But he did it for a reason, because Frederick Douglass was born on February 20th, who rose to lead his people out of bondage to freedom in this new world. Abraham Lincoln, I believe the 17th president of the United States, was born on February 12th. And I think, I don't know this for a fact, but he had to have been thinking, if he could merge those two dates together with Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln, we would be on to something. So I talk to you today with the hopes that at some point in our lives, we stop celebrating individuals by the skin tone. And we look so strongly at our history. I ask you, and I think, and I've talked about this a lot with my staff, many people never venture to imagine what this great America looked like 245 years ago in 1776, or even beyond to 1492. If you think about it, the individuals who first landed in the Americas were the Spanish, and they conquered the West, which is California. And then the French came, and they conquered that middle piece that deals with or shows Louisiana. And then the British. They kind of came late to the table, but they showed up in 1650 and beyond. I think some people refer to 1619. And before that, they came and they didn't fare so well. So this is what you're looking at. If any of you have seen Bridgerton, that movie, that show, not only describes what things looked like in those days, but just think about people dressed as beautifully as they were, concrete streets. And so they come to the new world looking for better things to enrich their lives at home. And by doing this, they walk up on people who don't have on dresses because they walk on land, who don't have cars or carts or boats because they live a different life. And by looking at them, they judged them and made a determination that they were uncivilized. And so as Americans, some of us feel like we can't handle that history because it's so ugly. But that history is also very beautiful because of what grew out of it. When you look at Frederick Douglass, who was born a slave, who ultimately advised a president, turned Lincoln's heart into a better approach, so that at one day Lincoln would no longer continue to say, if I could free no slaves and save the Union, I would do that. He gave him a sense of what it meant to be an African slave working for free in a country that did not value it. And so when we don't know our history, we're doomed to repeat its worst failures. So you look at history and you ask yourself, well, so what's the point? We don't want to be ashamed of our history and we don't want to always have to look at it. Can we just get along and move forward? You know, one of my best friends, I was having a long conversation about what I'm talking about now, said to me, why don't you just get over it? And I said, I don't have the luxury to just get over it. You do. And then I gave him a history lesson about the Irish, who were also brought into this country to be slave labor. But because of the color of their skin, they could escape slavery much easier than Black and brown. That's just my theory. Nobody told me this. So if you don't like it, go figure it out. But I just love history. I think there's a beauty to it. And I remember that young poet who said, the new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light if only we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to be it. I sure wish I had written those words. So magnificent. So I want to challenge you on this day to explore history. And when you explore history, you're going to develop that wonderful muscle in your body that is your brain. And I can see now my staff is like, their eyes are rolling over. Some of my other judge friends who have heard me say this so often are probably laughing. But it is true. Pick one event every day and learn it, and you will increase that muscle that's in your brain. So I challenge you to read what I think is one of the best history books that has ever been written. It's by Jill Lepore, and she wrote it I think in the last couple of years that it came out. It's 700 pages long. She leaves no stone unturned. She tells the real truth of these truths. And she starts it out the way Jefferson did in the Declaration of Independence. And this is all magnificent. So I'm going to end because my favorite subject has ended, the brain. And I just want to briefly talk a little bit about my history. I graduated from Tougaloo College in Jackson, Mississippi in 1972. I rode a bus to Tougaloo because the scholarship that I had sustained me only so far. I came straight from poverty. In the beginning, it happened to my mother in 1957, when my father, an Army veteran who couldn't support his family because the government would not give to him what they had given to others. But my father he had become, when he was in the military, he was trained as a person who could work in the hospitals. He was an orderly. And the doctor, I don't know, you probably have never heard of this doctor, but he's very famous because he was the one who actually created the whole concept of insulin to help diabetics and other individuals. And Dr. Guyton was his name, and he lived in Oxford, Mississippi. And when the University of Ole Miss was losing the medical school to Jackson, Dr. Guyton took two people with him that they called them helpers. My father was one of them. What's so really funny about this whole story and beautiful about the whole story is that my mother ended up working at that hospital after my father left her. He left her with 9 children and a recently born child. I call it 9 plus 1. My mother has such strength about and belief in the American dream, and all she wanted to do was to own her own house in her own home, and she did. But she ended up working at the same hospital that my father helped bring to Jackson. And so I tell that story about my mother because she had such great belief in her God and faith, and that he would take care of her. And I chose to look at it a little differently. I told her that I really, truly believe that I was very lucky. And we had this conversation when I was sworn in as a judge in February of 1991. And I actually interviewed her, which I suggest you do with your parents. Everybody should do it because it gives you, someday you might want to look back if your parents are lucky to be alive. And so I said to her, I think that I lived on Lucky Street. And I said that because to me, Lucky Street is that place where preparation and opportunity coincide. And if you have the opportunity to let what you have prepared for shine, then you can honestly be strong and make it in this country, in this new world. Because this new world was designed to have all kinds of people in it. It wasn't meant for just one group of people. Because if that's the case, then we're kind of messed up. Because that one group of people no longer English and is no longer French. They're a mixture of everybody. And so we should be proud of that. So I think I've talked enough. And I want to thank you for attending. I think, Judge, we only have 3 questions in the chat room, but I think Judge Turner is going to ask me some questions. and then we'll see where we go. And if it turns out that we end a little early, that is perfect. So I don't know if Judge Turner is ready or not, but I
Yes.
look forward to your questions. And if you don't want to go in the chat room, and if you're like me and you mess it up every time you try to use it, raise your hand and she'll recognize you.
Judge Blackmon, thank you so, so much. Your words are very encouraging, very inspirational, and it allows us to continue to hang on to hope, which we have to have in order to keep moving forward. Just would like to ask you, with regards to your experience over the last 30 years and your position at the Court of Appeals, is there anything that kind of stands out that is very memorable in any form or fashion that you would like to share with us at this particular time?
Well, one of the things that just popped in my head was when I first, you have to realize, I ran for the Court of Appeals straight from the prosecutor's office. I did not go through the trial court, and there were several judges who thought, first of all, I was too young, and number two, can you believe I'm talking about I was too young then, 30 years ago? And that some people thought that maybe I wasn't seasoned enough, that I didn't know enough. And there were some issues there. I mean, clearly, I had to demonstrate that this was a fit for me. And what I did, it was not through anything that I did. I just happened on my second week on the court. I ended up on February 19th sitting with two visiting judges. And the first visiting judge was John V. Corrigan. And if any of you know, I call him the father of the law of Ohio. And then there was Judge Priotel. And I sat with those two for a week. And all the cases we had that week argued. And Judge John V. had heard some of the comments that was being made about me being on the bench. And he set everyone straight. And so I ran into his son once, and he said, "You just don't know the impression you made on my father at that first oral argument that you had, because he just sang your praises all the time." And that kind of took a weight off my shoulder. And it was no longer, she doesn't belong. It was that she belongs. And so, and I never thought that race was the issue. And I'll tell you why I never thought that. Because the Court of Appeals is by nature supposed to be smart people, right? So the judges who were in charge at that time decided to hire an African-American secretary. So they figured that there were three of us initially who ran in the primary. Fleming ran for, I think it was February 10th. I ran for February 11th, and Sarah Harper ran for February 12th. And so they figured one of us was gonna win. So there needed to be an African-American secretary. And when two of us won, they were perplexed as to what to do. But I made the great decision to pick Marilyn Reeves as my secretary. And that was the best thing I ever could have done. And so I walk into the Court of Appeals, and this is really true. Well, not like anything else is not true, but Marilyn was my secretary. And this was her first experience working in the legal community. By the way, she went back to school and became a paralegal. That's how important it was for her. And Sanford Watson and Randy Keller, we were all spanking brand new. So we had a lot to learn, and we did very well, because I have looked back on those days. Somebody told me once that we had a large number of cases that were picked for, at that time, you had the Supreme Court had to pick your decision before it could be published. If it wasn't published, then it wasn't considered authority. It existed, but it wasn't authority. And so I'm very happy about that. That's the one thing I remember. And then there's that last 6 years when I was able to, every clerk I've ever had has been magnificent. I see a lot of them on the call. But that last 6-year term with Rochelle DeBeck and Darcy Datori, it just warms my heart as how wonderful we all got along and we were able to succeed. And that says nothing for the other 2 people in my life. Mary Beth Horowitz and the magnificent other clerk I had, Newton
Cargill.
Yes. Yeah, I was thinking of somebody else because I look at Newton, I think of another historical person. So, but Newton Cargill. So that's what I remember. I did find just getting to know other judges. I have to say this, of all the judges, and I've known a lot of judges over the period of time, but I think I've become very close friends with one in particular, and no one would have thought that. And that's Eileen A. Gallagher, who is amazingly funny and just an extraordinary human being. And I don't want Judge Ball to be upset, and I think of her the same way. Just kidding. I know, see, that's what happens. You start talking about people and then you end up in trouble, because then I have to, I see Bridget O'Brien is on the call, who has helped me to understand how to use a computer. If it hadn't been for Bridget, I would probably be lost in the weeds. And Janice Schwartz, who was also my law clerk, just extraordinary people. And I really am so blessed. Any other questions?
Judge Blackmon, so many of us, just see you, as I've indicated previously, as an inspiration, a trailblazer, a true role model, and you've been a mentor to so many. As you look at your last 30 years, it's now time to look forward. What are your plans? People want to know what are you going to do going forward after tomorrow or after today?
Well, you have to realize that I've been off for a year, technically, because we've been working remotely. So I work in my basement where I am now. So I've learned to experience this whole thing of being off, sort of. I'm just kidding about that, Judge Ball and our other administrative judges. I actually did my work when I was off. But I don't think of my life as that I need to plan something, because I will continue to do what I'm doing. I teach a course at BW, which is the Learning and Retirement for the Institute for Learning and Retirement for BW. And I've been teaching there since 2012. And I teach the court system. I use present day cases that are in existence, and I talk about how those cases go through the courtroom, and then I try to help them appreciate and understand how we make decisions as judges. That I've been doing, and now they have allowed me to teach mindfulness, and I started working for the National Judicial College. I am on their faculty, so whenever there's a mindfulness presentation this year, not this year, last year, we did 2 Zoom calls to judges in the Ukraine on mindfulness. There's a big push for judges to want to know, how do you deal with the stress of life, and what tools can you depend on? And so we bring them the information from mindfulness as as a tool to help you understand where your stress is coming from and how to be able to handle it and move forward and not be stressed and caught in the moment, but to actually live in that moment. So I've been doing that, and this is going to be my first class in April that I will start that program. I plan to play a lot of golf. If you see on the back, my new license plate says, "I'd rather be golfing." And that's something that I'm going to do. And I want to, I actually want Rochelle and Marilyn and I to get together at least once a month in our respective cities and have lunch together. I haven't told them this yet, but I'm now telling them. And hopefully we'll continue to talk and be together. I am working on a story about my mother and several books that are in my head. I write a lot of poetry, and I'm going to try to get something published at some point in my life. And so I have a lot to do. I just finally cleaned out my car with the boxes from the court. So I had 3 boxes left over, and I didn't want, because as you know, I had a huge elephant collection, and I gave all the elephants away. The ones that we did not give to individuals at the court, I gave the rest to my sorority, Delta Sigma Theta. Elephants are like a symbol of our sorority. And so I'm still trying to clean out other things. So I don't know if that's going to take me the rest of my life, but I live my life in decades. So I turned 70 last year, so I'm 71. I'm looking forward to going from 71 to 80. And then I think about it. And then I live my life in the next decade, and we'll see what happens. But I'm looking forward to these next 10 years. I think it's going to be really fun.
Great.
That's what I can see right now. Who knows?
Judge Blackmon, there are others who would like to know what led you on this path to the law?
Well, when I was living in Mississippi and going to school, I used to run home to watch Perry Mason. And so my grandfather tells this story. I don't even remember it. He said at 14, I told him I was going to be a lawyer. And when I ultimately decided, because I try to deal with life with tunnel vision. If I make a commitment that this is something I'm going to do, then I don't let anybody else get in the way with their issues. And so I concentrated on my work. And I was so blessed when I went to Tougaloo. Tougaloo is a historically Black college, and it's about 7 miles outside of Jackson. It was actually built after slavery by the United Church of Christ, or the UCC churches. At that time, they called themselves the congregational churches. And so they built several schools. Wilberforce is a sister school to Tougaloo. And I never thought that I would go to Tougaloo. I thought I would go to Jackson State. But I was so blessed when I ultimately ended up going to Lanier in my last 3 years in high school. I met a biology teacher who wanted me to participate in the Upward Bound program, and that helped. And so I kept getting these signals about the law. And so one year we were doing a play involving, we actually took the Scarlet Letter and we created a play around Hester, the main character. And we put her on trial, and I played the prosecuting attorney. And I was so aggressive because I've been watching a lot of Perry Mason, so I had a pretty good idea of how to cross-examine someone on the witness stand. And so the woman, the student who was playing Hester, jumped off the stage and attacked me. So I thought, wow, that was pretty good. If I could raise that kind of emotion in her, maybe I should, because you know how Perry Mason used to get people to confess right on the witness stand. So. But that day, one of the counselor's boyfriends came up to me and he said, "You should go to law school." And I said, "Wow, that's what I've been thinking." And he said, "And you should come to Texas Southern," because he was in He was in his last year at Texas Southern. And I said, that's exactly what I'm gonna do. And so the only school I really applied to, I had three, was Texas Southern, where my uncle lived, Georgetown, and Cleveland State, because Cleveland State started recruiting Blacks to go to law school. So I think that's the only thing I can think of. I put those different avenues together, and I think about Perry Mason, and I think about how important the law was. And when I first came to Cleveland, I told Judge Aldridge, who was not the judge at the time, she was a professor at the law school, I told her that I wanted to be a district attorney, and I wanted to go back to Mississippi and help my people, because the only way we were going to get out of this mess is to have good lawyers. Where I got that from, I paid attention. That's the only thing I can think of. But that's pretty much how I got on the path. And I never stopped. And I really never saw myself as a judge, except for if I got an opportunity to be on the federal bench and get appointed. And I did apply for an appointment, and it never happened. So one day I was talking to Carl Stokes, and he said he knew about the statute that created these three judgeships in Cuyahoga County, because I don't know if you know that initially in 1963, there were three judges, and then it became three more. And then in 1976, there were three additional. And that's when Judge Leo Jackson was elected to sit on the Court of Appeals. And before him had been Charles White, and Charles White was among that original six. And so the statute was going to come around in 1990 to appoint three more. And so Judge Carl Stokes at the time, he said, you should run for one of those seats. And then he said, run for it and tell everybody you're running for it, and pick one, and don't stop. And so I picked the 11th because my birthday is August the 11th. And that's how I ended up getting elected. So I tell you, I'm pretty lucky.
Judge Blackmon, earlier you had made reference to a book, 700 pages. Can you give us the spelling of that author and the book title again, please?
In fact, I'll show you the book so you'll see how thick it is. And then you can make your own decision. So sorry about that. I don't know if you can see it because it fades out. You know how this thing is. So it's called These Truths, and her name is Jill Lepore, Lepore, and it's the history of the United States. Sorry, Janice, it won't reflect, but it is a huge book. And I think, somebody says 700 pages. It's actually 900 pages if you include the index.
Thank you so much. Judge Blackmon, we have a request that you will conduct a session for the Court of Common Pleas General Division on mindfulness. So you may be contacted in the future with regards to coming together on that particular mission, if you're available.
I hope so. I would look forward to it. I know Judge Clancy has asked me about it before, and I said, anytime, I'd love to do it. We were all, when we went to Sedona in 2017, I believe, and we were able to learn from all the people who handled this through the National Judicial College. And I and Judge Mary Ball was there, and Larry Jones, and several of the Common Pleas Court judges, and including, I think, David Mattia was there, and Brandon. And so we learned a lot. And as a result of that, I got invited, because, I talked a lot at the seminar, and I got invited to go to the National Judicial College's conclave in Chicago after that. And I don't know how many of you have ever heard of Judge Lee Sinclair. He was a judge in Canton, Ohio. He's now retired, but he had been teaching mindfulness for the college for some time. And he and I teamed up, and then we added another judge from Florida who are part of our threesome. So I would love to do it.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. And finally, Judge Blackmon, there's a question with regards to what advice, if any, do you have for new attorneys, those who are just entering the profession and moving forward in that, in that vein?
Well, recently I did an article, and Bridget helped me with it with the Bar Association. And the one thing I keep saying over and over again is, if you don't know who you are and you don't know yourself, you don't know why you react the way you react, then you're going to have trouble in life. I know, because it happened to me. And so what I tried to do was to understand who I was as a person, why I had thoughts the way a lot of people think that they have a thought, and that is the gospel. It's just a thought that you have in your head, and your brain is giving you what you want. That's the unconscious part of it. And so if you keep doing that, you're going to make mistakes. And instead of just taking a deep breath and asking yourself, what do I want to accomplish? And how do I want to set my life goals? If you're a young lawyer, I wish somebody had said this to me when I was first practicing. Oh my goodness, I stepped in so much mud. It could have been a whole new person. But sometimes you have to wait to learn where you are in the experiences that you have. And I think that would be my best advice. Sit down and have a good conversation with yourself and figure out who you are, especially judges, because we by nature are told to react to what is happening in front of us. The question is, how do you respond? Because when you respond, it comes out way different than how you react. Because if you're reacting to it, then you're judging it. And at that point, and I know people say, well, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. I used to use that language too. But I love what Justice Stewart said at her swearing in. She said she wanted to be not judgmental, but to judge, not to be judgmental. Because when you are judgmental, you're using what you see, you're using what you hear, you're using all these 6 senses that you have that could be sending you wrong signals. It doesn't have to be what is the truth. And I think that's complicated for a number of people, but I just sit down and ask yourself, is this what I want to do? And how do I want to do it? And make sure you do it in a way that is respectful and honest toward everybody. That's what I think.
And Judge Blackmon, do you think that that we in Ohio should keep the mandatory retirement age for judges at 70?
Absolutely. I have no problem with that, because I am 71 and I kind of understand what is happening. I know a lot of people want to work, but this is just me. You asked me for my personal opinion. I have no problem with retiring at 70. In fact, I probably should have retired at 65. I don't have more time, so to have some fun. But I know who I am, and I know how my brain works. And I know that there are some things that and I'm not saying this about everybody, I'm only talking about me. And if some people don't like it, that's okay with me, but just remember, I come from my own experience. And I say that it's not a bad idea when you turn 70 to alter how you are experiencing the world. Because when you alter it, you will start to shift and make better choices, I think, as opposed to staying in the same position and staying in the same job over and over and over again. You never get anywhere doing the same thing over and over again. It doesn't, well, I don't think I have the right to say it doesn't work, but it didn't work for me. Let's put it like that. So I'm all right with it.
Thank you so much, Judge Blackmon. It has truly, truly been a pleasure. I mean, this has been a momentous occasion for all of us. We've had quite a few participants. I see 75. And so that is very good.
Wonderful. That was, I think we owe that to Judge Sheehan, because apparently he sent the link out to the Court of Appeals and all of the judges around the in our county. And having done that, it alerted everyone to this particular event. And I think that was a wonderful idea. I may be wrong about that, but I think that's what happened. So.
Actually, Judge Blackmon, I see some people here from outside our county. I see some judges from other counties on.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, our reach was wide, and that's always good. Well, I don't see any additional questions.